The dust in the repository settled in layers, just like the memories and forgotten histories it contained. Curator Kalen Var sighed, his crystalline-patterned skin catching the dim light as he adjusted his multiple eyes to better focus on the inventory manifest. Another day, another cycle of cataloging relics no one cared about. Is everything all right, Curator? Pip scurried across the desk, 8 limbs moving in perfect coordination despite the turret's diminutive size. The small assistant's antennae twitched with concern. Just the usual tedium, Pip, Kalen replied, his voice tinged with the weariness that came from decades of scholarly isolation. The Interspecies Antiquities Repository continues its grand tradition of preserving history that the Galactic Concord has deemed worthy of forgetting. Pip chittered softly, a sound Kalen had come to recognize as sympathetic laughter. Speaking of which, I've been asked to inform you that the Science Division wishes to conduct yet another analysis of the Aegis shell. Kalen's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of irritation among Xylosians. Another futile attempt? They've tried every scanning technology in the Concord's arsenal. What do they expect to find this time? They brought in a Medusan metallurgist, Pip offered. Apparently, they believe her unique perception of quantum states might reveal something new. Kalen pushed himself away from his desk, the hovering chair gliding silently across the polished floor. Very well, let's humor them, shall we? It's not as if we have anything more pressing to attend to. The repository sprawled like a labyrinthine tomb, its vast corridors housing artifacts from thousands of worlds and extinct civilizations. Most visitors, the few who bothered to come, described it as eerily quiet, like walking through a mausoleum of forgotten achievements. Kalen had grown used to the silence, even found comfort in it. Today, however, it felt oppressive. They arrived at the special containment wing where the Aegis shell was kept. The silver, fluid-like armor hung, suspended in a gravity field, its surface slowly shifting with subtle patterns that seemed to change whenever one looked away. For nearly 70 years, it had been the repository's most studied and least understood artifact. Remind me of its history again, the Medusan metallurgist requested as she set up her equipment. Her tentacle-like hair was connected to various sensory devices that expanded her already formidable perceptions. Kalen recited the facts mechanically, having done so countless times. The Aegis shell was discovered aboard a derelict vessel of unknown origin approximately 73 standard years ago. The ship's design matched no known species and had been adrift for an estimated minimum of 10,000 years based on radiation decay patterns. The armor itself has proven impervious to all forms of damage, resists all analytical composition scans, and most notably, Kalen paused, gesturing to the holophiles displaying previous experiments, cannot be worn by any known sentient species. Over 300 distinct species have attempted to don it. The results range from the armor becoming impossibly heavy, to its seeming to slip away from the wearer, to causing extreme neurological distress. The Medusan circled the artifact, her hair tentacles extending toward it without making contact. It's as if it's waiting for something, or someone, she mused. A romantic notion, Kalen replied dismissively. More likely it's simply incompatible with modern physiology. The galaxy has changed considerably in 10,000 years. As a Medusan began her analysis, Pip scuttled up to Kalen's shoulder, one of the turret's favorite perches. There's a human trading vessel requesting docking permission at the station, the assistant whispered. The Wanderer. They claim to need minor repairs and are offering some exotic foodstuffs in trade. Kalen barely acknowledged the information. Humans were a relatively new addition to the galactic community, primitive by most standards, with unremarkable technology and no significant political influence. They occupied a handful of systems on the Concord's fringe, mostly engaging in small-scale trade of novelty items. Let station security handle it, he replied. I doubt they'll have any interest in ancient history. Several hours later, the Medusan's analysis concluded with the same result as all previous attempts. Inconclusive. The armor remained steadfastly mysterious, its composition unidentifiable, its purpose unknown. "I apologize for wasting your time, curator," the metallurgist said, genuine disappointment in her voice. "There's something about its quantum structure that shifts when I try to observe it, almost as if it's actively resisting analysis." Kalen nodded politely, though internally he had expected nothing else. The Aegis shell had become a symbol of his own career. Mysterious, isolated, resistant to understanding, ultimately futile. Later, in his office, Kalen stared out the viewport at the vast emptiness of space. Somewhere in the distance, the small human vessel would be docking, its crew blissfully unaware of the ancient mysteries that surrounded them. Kalen envied their simplicity, their freedom from the weight of forgotten histories. The Aegis shell, like his own life, seemed destined to remain unchanging, a silent testament to questions that would never be answered. How wrong he was. "You must be joking," Kalen said, his crystalline skin patterns darkening with disbelief. Pip's antennae quivered with excitement. "Not at all. The human specifically requested information about trade routes through the Cygnus Void. Those records are only housed here in the repository. And you suggested they visit? Without consulting me first." Kalen's multiple eyes narrowed. "Well, yes," Pip admitted, shrinking slightly under Kalen's gaze. Their engineer seemed genuinely interested in historical navigation data. "And honestly, curator, when was the last time anyone showed interest in our archives?" Kalen couldn't argue with that logic, though he wanted to. The repository received so few visitors that any break in routine was disruptive. Still, protocol was protocol. "Very well, but I'll need to supervise them personally. The unclassified sections only, and they are not to touch anything." 2 hours later, Kalen found himself reluctantly escorting 2 humans through the repository's main archive hall. Captain Eva Rostova was a stern-looking woman with close-cropped gray hair and the weathered face of someone who had spent decades in space. Her companion, a young man introduced as Liam Chun, was the ship's engineer, lanky, with curious eyes that darted everywhere as if trying to absorb every detail at once. "Your facility is incredible," Liam said, breaking the awkward silence. "How far back do these records go?" "The oldest artifacts date back approximately 30,000 standard years," Kalen replied stiffly, "though most are considerably younger. And all of this is just sitting here." Liam gestured at the endless rows of artifacts and data storage units. "Doesn't anyone study them?" "The Concord funds the repository to preserve history, not necessarily to study it," Kalen said, unable to keep a hint of bitterness from his voice. "Most species prefer to focus on the future." They continued through the cavernous halls, Kalen providing minimal commentary, while Captain Rostova maintained a professional distance. The young engineer, however, asked surprisingly insightful questions about preservation techniques and cataloging systems. "We'll need to pass through the special collections area to reach the navigational archives," Kalen explained as they approached a security checkpoint. "Please remain in the center of the walkway and do not touch anything." The Special Collections wing housed the repository's most valuable and mysterious artifacts, items that defied conventional analysis or originated from unknown civilizations. In the center of the main chamber, suspended in its gravity field, was the Aegis shell. Liam stopped dead in his tracks. "What is that?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Kalen followed his gaze. "The Aegis shell, an armor of unknown origin and composition. It's beautiful," Liam interrupted, taking a step toward it. The silver surface of the armor seemed to ripple slightly, like the surface of water disturbed by a gentle breeze. Kalen frowned. In all his years studying the artifact, he had never seen it react to mere proximity. "Please maintain your distance," he warned sharply. "This artifact is highly sensitive." Liam nodded, but his eyes remained fixed on the armor. "It looks almost alive." "That's a poetic but inaccurate assessment," Kalen replied. "Now, if we could continue." What happened next occurred so quickly that Kalen's multiple eyes couldn't track the sequence of events. Later, he would piece it together. Liam had gestured while asking another question, Captain Rostova had moved to pull him back, and the young engineer had stumbled slightly, his outstretched hand brushing against the surface of the Aegis shell. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic. Brilliant blue-white light erupted from the armor, bathing the chamber in its glow. A deep, resonant hum filled the air, vibrating through the floor and walls. Alarms blared as the repository's security systems detected the massive energy surge. Through the chaos, Kalen saw the Aegis shell's surface come alive with complex, flowing patterns of light, symbols and geometries that seemed to shift and transform even as he watched. And all of it was focused on Liam, who stood frozen, his hands still touching the armor's surface, his eyes wide with shock. "Step away from the artifact immediately." Kalen shouted over the alarms, but Liam seemed incapable of movement, transfixed by whatever was happening. Security drones swarmed into the chamber, weapons trained on both the humans and the activated artifact. Captain Rostova moved protectively toward her crewman. "He didn't mean to touch it," she called out, hands raised. "It was an accident." Finally, Liam staggered backward, breaking contact with the armor. The light dimmed slightly, but didn't fade entirely. The young man looked dazed, one hand pressed to his temple. I saw something," he murmured. "Words, images, I don't understand." Before Kalen could respond, his communication implant buzzed urgently. The repository director herself was calling, along with the station's chief of security. "Contain the humans and secure the artifact," the security chief ordered. "This is now classified as a Level 1 security breach." As armed guards surrounded them, Kalen found himself staring at the Aegis shell with a mixture of shock and scientific fascination. For 73 years, the artifact had remained stubbornly inert, resisting all attempts at activation or analysis. Then a human, a member of one of the galaxy's youngest, most technologically backward species, had touched it once by accident, and everything had changed. The humans had been taken to a secure isolation chamber, while Kalen had been summoned to an emergency meeting with the repository's governing council. The incident had already been escalated to Concord Intelligence, with rumors flying about possible human subterfuge. "It's preposterous," Kalen argued, his normally reserved demeanor giving way to uncharacteristic passion. "The humans possess neither the technology nor the knowledge to have engineered this." The young engineer clearly had no idea what would happen. "Then how do you explain it?" demanded Director Voss, her insectoid mandibles clicking with agitation. "In all our years of study, with hundreds of the Concord's finest minds, this artifact has remained inactive. Then a human touches it, and suddenly it's a beacon of energy." "I can't explain it yet," Kalen admitted. "But jumping to conspiracy theories helps no one. We need to speak with them, especially the young engineer. He claimed to have seen images when he touched the armor." After much debate, permission was granted for Kalen to interrogate the humans, accompanied by a security officer. They found Captain Rostova and Liam in adjacent cells, separated by a transparent barrier. "This is an outrage," Rostova began immediately. "We've committed no crime. My engineer accidentally touched your artifact. He didn't damage it." "We're aware," Kalen replied, trying to sound reassuring. "But the situation is unprecedented and potentially dangerous. I need to understand exactly what happened." He turned to Liam, who looked pale but composed. "You said you saw images when you touched the Aegis shell. Can you describe them?" Liam ran a hand through his hair, looking uncertain. "It's hard to explain. They weren't exactly images like pictures. More like impressions, fragments of thought. There were symbols, similar to the ones that appeared on the armor surface, and voices speaking a language I didn't recognize but somehow almost understood." "Did you feel anything physical?" Kalen pressed. "A connection," Liam said after a moment's consideration. "Like the armor was recognizing me, somehow, and there was a sense of urgency, of warning." The security officer scoffed. "Convenient that only you can feel this connection. For all we know, you could be making this up to cover for industrial espionage." "I'm telling the truth," Liam insisted. "And there's something else." He hesitated, glancing at his captain. Rostova nodded. Go ahead, Liam. The symbols I saw, they reminded me of something. Old stories, legends passed down in some of the isolated human colonies in the Outer Rim. Tales about the builders of stars and their war with the devourers of light. Kalen's interest sharpened. Folklore? What kind of stories? Most humans consider them just myths, Liam explained. Stories told by the first generation of space travelers. They speak of a golden age long ago, when beings called the Architects ruled the galaxy with wisdom and power. But they didn't just disappear peacefully, as your Concord history claims. They faced a terrible enemy from the darkness between realities, creatures called the reality corroders. Kalen's skin patterns shifted with surprise. The Concord historical records state that the Lumina, what you call Architects, simply transcended physical existence. Our stories tell it differently, Liam continued. They say the Architects created special warriors, guardians, with unique abilities to fight the corroders. The war was devastating, and its outcome unclear. Only that the Architects vanished, and the Guardians were scattered across the stars. As Liam spoke, monitoring devices in the secure holding area registered a faint energy signature emanating from the Special Collections Wing, from the Aegis shell, which continued to glow with subdued light. The artifact is responding to him, Kalen murmured, watching the readings. Even at this distance, the security officer looked troubled. This is beyond my authority. We need to report this to Concord Intelligence immediately. Wait, Kalen said, a new thought forming. Before we do that, I want to check something in the archives. Hours later, alone in the deepest, oldest section of the repository's data vaults, Kalen stared at his findings with growing amazement. He had bypassed several security protocols, actions that could cost him his position, to access sealed records classified as historically inconsistent or data anomalies. What he found shook the foundations of everything he thought he knew about galactic history. Fragmented records, dismissed as corrupted data or translation errors, spoke of Terra support units and specialized biological warriors serving the Architects in their struggle against reality destabilizing entities. These records have been systematically categorized as unreliable compared to the official Concord history, which described the Architect's disappearance as a peaceful ascension to a higher plane of existence. But most shocking of all, the symbols Liam had described, the same patterns that now flowed across the Aegis shell, matched rare markings found at ancient Architect sites that had defied translation by Concord linguists. Kalen sat back, his mind racing. The implications were staggering. If these buried records were accurate, then the Concord's entire historical narrative was incomplete at best, deliberately falsified at worst. The Architects hadn't transcended. They had fought a war, perhaps even lost. And humans, or their direct ancestors, might have been engineered warriors in that conflict. The Aegis shell wasn't a relic of the Architects themselves, but equipment specifically designed for these guardians, genetically or biologically coded to them alone. That would explain why no other species could wear it. With trembling hands, Kalen compiled his findings and requested an emergency meeting with the repository director and key members of the Security Council. His reputation for methodical, cautious research meant they granted his request, despite the hour. What you're suggesting is heretical, Director Voss said after Kalen presented his evidence. Her compound eyes reflected the holographic displays of the ancient records. You're challenging the foundational history of the Concord. I'm presenting evidence that contradicts that history, Kalen corrected, and offering a hypothesis that explains the Aegis shell's reaction to human contact. If I'm right, the humans aren't a threat. They're a key to understanding our past. Even if your theory has merit, the security chief interjected, it doesn't explain why the artifact activated now, after remaining dormant for millennia. Why this human? Why today? It was a question Kalen couldn't answer, but one that haunted him as the council debated late into the night. The humans remained in custody, but the atmosphere had shifted from suspicion to uneasy curiosity. If Kalen's hypothesis was correct, humanity held a significance in galactic history that no one had suspected. The pressure to uncover the truth intensified with each passing hour. "This approach isn't working," Kalen protested, watching as Concord scientists attempted to use samples of Liam's DNA and biosignature scans to force a response from the Aegis shell. "You can't trick the artifact with partial biological signatures." The lead scientist, a tall Deveronian with implanted neural enhancers, ignored him. "If there's a genetic or biological key, we'll isolate it. The human doesn't need to be physically present." The experiment chamber had been reinforced with energy-dampening fields after previous attempts had resulted in dangerous power surges from the armor. Even now, the Aegis shell pulsed with rhythmic light, as if responding to the distant presence of Liam in his cell. When they applied the concentrated biomarker solution directly to the armor's surface, the response was immediate and violent. A shockwave of energy burst outward, overloading the dampening fields and sending equipment flying. Scientists ducked for cover as alarms blared once again. The Aegis shell's light pattern had changed from a steady glow to rapid, erratic pulses, almost like a distress signal. In his isolation cell, Liam doubled over in pain, clutching his head. "Stop," he gasped. "You're hurting it." Captain Rostova pounded on the barrier, separating them from the guards. "Something's wrong with my engineer. He needs medical attention." Kalen, who had been monitoring both the experiment and the humans, rushed to the isolation cells. He found Liam pale and sweating, but the young man waved away concerns about his health. "It's not me," Liam insisted. "It's the armor. I can feel it, fighting back. It doesn't want to be forced." "You can sense the armor's feelings?" Kalen asked, scientific curiosity overriding his skepticism. "Not exactly feelings. More like intentions, purposes." Liam struggled to find the words. "It's hard to explain, but I know that what they're doing is wrong. The Aegis shell isn't meant to be controlled or forced. It's meant to be partnered with." Kalen made a decision that could end his career. "I believe you, and I think I can convince the director to let you approach the artifact again, willingly this time." It took all of Kalen's accumulated reputation and the backing of several council members who had been swayed by his historical findings to gain approval for the attempt. Even then, the security precautions were extreme. A battalion of armed guards, remote shutdown systems for the entire repository section, and emergency evacuation protocols for the station. Liam stood before the Aegis shell, which pulsed with anticipation, its silver surface rippling more actively than ever before. Captain Rostova watched anxiously from behind a protective barrier, alongside Kalen, Pip, and a dozen Concord officials. "What exactly am I supposed to do?" Liam asked, his voice steady despite the circumstances. "Trust your instincts," Kalen advised. "Don't try to control it. Try to listen to it, as you described earlier." Liam nodded, took a deep breath, and stepped forward. With deliberate slowness, he raised his hand and placed it flat against the armor's surface. The reaction was nothing like the chaotic explosion of energy from the first contact. This time, the Aegis shell emitted a steady, brilliant light that enveloped Liam in a cocoon of radiance. The armor liquefied, flowing over his outstretched hand, up his arm, and gradually encasing his entire body. The process took less than 30 seconds. When it was complete, Liam stood transformed, encased in the perfectly fitted Aegis shell. The armor moved with him as naturally as his own skin, its surface now stable but marked with intricate patterns of light that pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat. "Liam," Captain Rostova called out, her voice tight with concern. "Are you all right?" The helmet area of the armor reconfigured, opening to reveal Liam's face. He looked stunned but unharmed. "I'm fine," he said. "Better than fine. I can see everything." Through a neural interface or direct mental connection, the Aegis shell was sharing information, flooding Liam's consciousness with images, knowledge, and memories stored within its ancient systems. A holographic projection blossomed in the air around him, translating some of this data for the observers. The truth was revealed in all its terrible glory. The architects had indeed fought the reality corroders, non-corporeal entities from a different dimensional plane that attacked by degrading the fabric of reality itself and corrupting minds. Humans have been genetically engineered by the architects, enhanced with unique mental resistance and local reality-stabilizing abilities that the architects themselves lacked. They were literally sentinels of reality, and the Aegis shell was their specialized combat/protection technology. The war had raged across the galaxy. In a final, desperate measure, the architects had sacrificed themselves, using their ultimate technology to create the Great Seal that imprisoned the corroders in their own dimension. The cost was the collapse of their civilization. The surviving Guardians, stripped of most technology and knowledge, were scattered throughout the galaxy, eventually becoming modern humans, their potential locked away in their DNA. But most urgently, the Aegis shell had not activated randomly. Its ancient sensors had detected the first signs of the Great Seal weakening. The reality corroders were beginning to probe for ways back into this dimension. As if to confirm this revelation, strange phenomena began manifesting throughout the repository. Small areas of sudden temperature drop, fleeting hallucinations, sensitive equipment malfunctioning in peculiar ways, and a pervasive sense of unease spreading through the minds of psychically sensitive beings. These were the first ripples from the weakening seal. "It's happening already," Liam said, his voice altered slightly by the armor systems. "The Aegis shell has been monitoring subdimensional stability for millennia. The degradation began approximately 30 standard years ago, but has accelerated rapidly in recent months." Director Voss stepped forward, her mandibles clicking rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation among her species. "If what you're showing us is true, then we face a threat unlike anything in recorded Concord history. Worse than that," Kalen added, the full implications dawning on him. "If the reality corroders return, conventional weapons will be useless against them. They don't exist fully in our dimensional plane." A tremor ran through the station, subtle but unmistakable. The lights flickered, and several holographic systems glitched momentarily. "What was that?" someone demanded. Liam turned toward a seemingly empty corner of the chamber, the Aegis shell's sensors detecting something invisible to normal perception. "They're testing the boundaries," he said grimly. A localized reality erosion point is forming. Before anyone could respond, a section of the chamber changed. It was difficult for the observers to process what they were seeing. It wasn't a portal or a breach in the physical sense, more like an area where reality itself became malleable, distorted. The air shimmered with impossible colors, and light bent in ways that hurt the eyes to witness. Equipment near the anomaly began to malfunction, metals warping and electronics failing. More disturbingly, those closest to the distortion felt an overwhelming sense of dread and confusion, their thoughts becoming jumbled and chaotic. Several guards dropped their weapons, clutching their heads or backing away in terror. "Fall back," the security chief ordered, but the command came out slurred, as if even language itself was becoming unstable near the erosion point. Liam, protected by the Aegis shell, stepped forward instead of retreating. The armor glowed more intensely, emitting a field of stabilizing energy that pushed back against the reality distortion. "I know what to do," he said, his voice calm despite the chaos. "The armor is showing me." He raised his arms, and the Aegis shell responded, projecting a dome of pure, structured reality, a localized reinforcement of the natural laws of this dimension. Where this energy met the distortion, there was a visual clash, like oil and water refusing to mix. Liam pushed forward, the reality-stabilizing field from the armor driving back the erosion point. The effort was clearly taxing. Even with the armor's support, beads of sweat formed on his visible face as he concentrated. With a final surge of energy, the armor released a pulse that sealed the weakened point, forcing it closed. The distortion collapsed in on itself and vanished, leaving behind only a lingering sense of wrongness and a small area of floor where the material had been subtly altered, metal transformed into something glass-like and brittle. Silence fell over the chamber as everyone processed what they had just witnessed. The security systems had recorded everything, providing irrefutable evidence of both the threat and Liam's ability to counter it. Director Voss was the first to speak. "I believe an apology is in order," she said formally, addressing Captain Rostova and Liam, "and perhaps a reconsideration of humanity's status within the Concord." What followed was a flurry of activity that transformed the sleepy repository into the center of a galactic crisis response. High-ranking Concord officials arrived within days. Security protocols were overhauled, and the historical records Kalen had discovered were reviewed at the highest levels. The IAR became the headquarters for research into both the reality corroders and the Guardian legacy. Kalen found himself appointed to lead the historical research division, his expertise and open-minded approach now valued beyond measure. Liam, with Kalen and Eva's support, began exploring the full capabilities of the Aegis shell and accessing what remaining data it contained about the locations of other shells or potential guardians, humans with compatible DNA. The Concord initiated a massive mobilization of resources, sending warning messages and seeking cooperation based on the newly discovered information. Every member species was briefed on the potential threat, and plans were made to locate and activate other Guardian artifacts that might be scattered throughout the galaxy. 3 weeks after the incident, Kalen stood in his newly expanded office, gazing out at the ships coming and going from the station. No longer a forgotten outpost, but a hub of frantic activity. Pip scurried across his desk, organizing data crystals containing the latest research findings. If anyone had told me a month ago that my life's work would suddenly become the Concord's highest priority, I would have questioned their mental stability, Kalen remarked. And if anyone had told you that humans would be the key to saving the galaxy? Pip chittered, antennae twitching with amusement. I would have had them committed for psychiatric evaluation, Kalen admitted. The door slid open, and Liam entered. He no longer wore the Aegis shell constantly. They had discovered it could be dismissed and recalled that while once properly bonded, but its influence was visible in his confident stance and the subtle shimmer that occasionally passed across his eyes. "Captain Rostov's ship has been retrofitted as requested," he reported. "We'll be ready to depart for the coordinates in the Arcturus sector tomorrow." Kalen nodded. The coordinates had been extracted from the Aegis shell's ancient memory. The possible location of another Guardian artifact, or perhaps even a sealed facility from the Architect era. "Do you ever wonder," Kalen asked, "why it was you specifically? Out of all humans, why did the Aegis shell respond to you?" Liam smiled slightly. "The armor showed me that too. My genetic pattern has a specific marker, a rare variation that appears in less than 1% of humans. It's a direct lineage from the original Guardians, maintained across thousands of generations. There are others like me, scattered throughout human colonies. We just need to find them and activate their potential before the reality corroders break through completely," Kalen added soberly. They stood together, looking at a holographic display of the galaxy, where subtle distortions, potential weak points in the Great Seal, were highlighted in pulsing red. Dozens were already visible, and more appeared each day as the Concord improved its detection systems. "I never thought I'd say this," Kalen said, "but I almost missed the days when my greatest concern was dust accumulation on ancient pottery." "Too late for that now," Liam replied, "but not too late for everything else. The Aegis shell may have been dormant for millennia, but it never stopped its vigil, and neither will we." As if in response to his words, a faint tremor ran through the station, another reality ripple stronger than the last. They were becoming more frequent, a reminder that time was running short. The ancient armor that had once been a mystery, a symbol of stagnation and futility, had become, through the touch of a human, a beacon of hope, a rediscovered legacy, and the first weapon in a struggle for survival that would unite the galaxy as never before. The reality corroders were stirring, testing their prison's weakening walls. But this time, the Guardians would be ready to meet them. The hunt was about to begin again.